Hey guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about the Fantastic Four Visionaries, Volume 4. This collects issues 258 through 267 of Fantastic Four, Alpha Flight Issue 4, and The Thing Issue 10. This is probably the most crossover-heavy portion of John Byrne's run on the Fantastic Four. There are, by my count, 3 separate crossovers going on in this book, and each crossover is a different kind of crossover. The first one is a straight-up crossover with Alpha Flight. You've got, in one of the earliest issues of this book, of the Fantastic Four, Namor is underwater investigating something, and then at the end of the issue he comes to Sue Storm and he says, "Hey, I need your help." And then that issue ends, and then you go to Alpha Flight, where he and Sue go and help Alpha Flight fight this bad guy who's doing evil stuff underwater. And then the next issue of Fantastic Four, Namor is thanking Sue for her help, and then he flies away. And that is portrayed in such a way where if you are just interested in reading Fantastic Four, if you have no interest in Alpha Flight at all, you can skip that Alpha Flight issue, and nothing really major is going to affect your reading of these issues of Fantastic Four. You will be able to tell that you missed a side story with Sue and the Submariner, but it's not going to be such a huge impact like, I feel like something happened here and I don't understand what's going on in these issues of Fantastic Four. It's not like one big story that was divided up into 2 parts, and half of that story is presented in an issue of Fantastic Four, and then you have to go and read the issue of Alpha Flight to see what happens next. It's like this is a complete story, and then it teases a story in Alpha Flight, and then that story is teased once again in the next issue of Fantastic Four. And I had read that issue of Alpha Flight back when I was reading Byrne's Alpha Flight run, so this time, reading through his Fantastic Four run, I skipped that issue of Alpha Flight, and I can attest that you don't have to read that issue of Alpha Flight in order to enjoy these issues of Fantastic Four. And so I know there's people out there who probably don't care about Alpha Flight, but they probably are interested in reading Fantastic Four, and so you don't have to read the issue of Alpha Flight to enjoy the rest of the issues in this book. The next issue that is kind of a crossover is issue 262, The Trial of Reed Richards, and this is a very interesting development in this run. Basically, you had John Byrne, who once upon a time was the co-plotter and artist on Uncanny X-Men with Chris Claremont. And then, for reasons that I won't get into here, very long story short, basically, John Byrne felt like he wasn't getting enough of a say in creating the story on X-Men, so he left that book and eventually came over to Fantastic Four. Well, then, shortly after John Byrne left, Chris Claremont did a story with Dave Cockrum, where Dr. Doom and Arcade team up to fight the X-Men. And in the course of that story, Arcade has a match, and he lights the match, he strikes it on Dr. Doom's armor so that he can light his cigarette or his pipe or whatever it was that he was smoking. At some point in John Byrne's run, I don't think it's in this volume, but it might have been, Dr. Doom is talking to a whole bunch of his Doombots, and he sees one of the Doombots that has a little piece on the suit that's missing, and he says, "Doombot number whatever, what happened here?" And he says, "Well, I was working with Arcade, and he struck a match on me." And Dr. Doom says, "And you let him live? Why would you do that?" And the Doombot says, "Well, I thought maybe you would want him to be alive in case you needed him for something." And Dr. Doom destroys that Doombot and says, "Doom needs no one. You all should remember that. Do not let this kind of thing happen again." And basically, at this point, it was Chris Claremont and John Byrne kind of having a peeing contest, if you will, saying, like, you know what, you think that you can do a story with Dr. Doom and treat him that way? Well, I'm going to turn around and say that you don't know what you're talking about, and that's not really Dr. Doom. That was one of his many Doombots. And then you're thinking, okay, the ball's in Claremont's court, what's he going to do now? So then, in one of the issues where Lilandra, the Empress of the Shi'ar Empire, she's on Earth visiting the X-Men, and she's having a nice little quiet time with Charles Xavier, and then I believe what's-his-face, Guardian of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, he comes and says, "Hey, we just found out that Reed Richards let Galactus live." And then she's like, "What? Are you kidding me? Marshal everybody. We've got to go and put him on trial." And that happened in an issue of X-Men. And allegedly, Chris Claremont put that in his issue without telling John Byrne that he was going to be doing that. And you would think, you're reading this issue of X-Men, you would think that he is setting up a story that is going to happen in Fantastic Four. But allegedly, he didn't even tell Byrne that he was doing doing this. He just said, okay, the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, they would not be happy if they found out that Reed Richards had the chance to let Galactus die, and he didn't take that chance. And so then you've got the trial of Reed Richards that John Byrne, when he found out that Claremont did this, he kind of had to scramble and plan for this issue in Fantastic Four. And apparently he had like his entire run planned out, and then he had to kind of move some stuff around to do the trial of Reed Richards, which is one of those issues that you hear about a lot. At least I've heard a lot about this issue, and unfortunately I didn't really like the issue. I didn't think that it was done very well. Number one, it's one of those issues where it deals a lot with the conceit that within the Marvel Universe there is a Marvel Comics company, and there's people like John Byrne and Bill Mantlo and people like that who work at the Marvel Comics company. And so the fictional version of John Byrne shows up in this issue, and the Watcher kidnaps him and takes him to the trial of Reed Richards so that he can see the story, and then he can go back to Earth and he can write and draw it and make an issue of the Fantastic Four. And a lot of people are probably going to see that and they're going to be like, this is really goofy, this is too silly for my taste. I personally don't mind the conceit that within the Marvel Universe there is a Marvel Comics company that does official and somewhat unofficial comic book stories about the real heroes of the Marvel Universe. I don't mind that, but I don't necessarily have to see the fictional versions of these real comic book creators showing up in the comics as often as they do. And it's definitely something that happened a lot more in the 60s and 70s than it does today. And this is in the mid-80s, I guess, maybe 83, something like that. And I would say by the time you got to the late 80s, that sort of thing wasn't happening at all anymore. But this was probably one of the later instances of that sort of thing happening. And so if you're one of those people who you don't like, oh great, this is another one of those issues that has the real staff of Marvel meeting the heroes of this comic book, if you don't like that sort of thing, that is happening in the issue where Reed Richards is put on trial. But that wasn't even really the big thing that I hated about the issue. Mainly, I felt like it was just kind of a silly story. I feel like it should have been stretched out a little bit. We should have had like more of an actual trial. In that issue, we have like this big, huge chandelier thing, and it's glowing all these different colors, and we are told that Reed Richards will only be proven innocent if all of those little chandelier bulbs glow white. And so if even like 99 of them glow white and one of them glows red, then Reed Richards is still not innocent. And that's just a really dumb plot contrivance. And then, while Reed is on trial, you've got all these different cosmic entities that come to testify on Reed's behalf. Odin comes at one point and says, listen, Galactus is bigger than all of you, and Reed Richards didn't have a choice. He had to save Galactus' life. And then some people are like, oh, okay, well, I believe you. Reed Richards is innocent. But then that doesn't actually make everyone else believe that he's innocent. And then you've got Eternity, the big cosmic embodiment of eternity. He comes and says his piece to try and defend Reed. And then the Watcher has to give his piece. And it takes 3 chances for everyone in the galaxy to say, oh, okay, Reed Richards is innocent now. And it's just kind of a silly issue. I feel like they should have done more to have Reed Richards kind of arguing his case, and then have someone else like Lilandra kind of arguing against him. We should have had more of kind of a debate, kind of you've got this moral decision, and you've got these 2 very valid sides of this argument. You should have had more of an exploration of that, and then you should have had slowly, kind of like 12 Angry Men, slowly the people who are against Reed would slowly come to realize that Reed is correct and that he should have saved Galactus' life. In my opinion, that's what that issue should have been. Of course, then it would have taken more than one issue probably to really explore that story the way that I wish that it had been explored. But as is, I really didn't care for the trial of Reed Richards. And then you've got the third crossover in this book is right around this time, Secret Wars was starting to happen. And Secret Wars was basically a 12-issue maxi series, I believe, where most of the heroes of the Marvel Universe were more or less kidnapped from Earth, taken to this faraway world where the Beyonder told them, hey, if you fight each other, and he also took a whole bunch of supervillains and put them on this Earth, and he said, if you guys fight each other, I will give the winner whatever they want. And then it's a really good story. I don't think I've reviewed it before, but it's one of those things, maybe I need to reread it someday and review it. But basically, while this 12-issue miniseries was going on, you've got like an issue where the 3 members of the Fantastic Four, the Thing, the Human Torch, and Reed Richards, they are taken to Battleworld, and then the next month, they come back, and it's like, okay, wow, we've just had this really crazy adventure. But meanwhile, the people reading the Fantastic Four have only read like one issue of Secret Wars at that point. And the Thing, he was left behind on Battleworld. He did not want to stay on he did not want to come back to Earth. He wanted to stay. He had more or less broken up with Alicia Masters at this point, basically saying he still loved her, but he didn't feel like he could give her the life that she deserved, and he wanted something else. And so when they went to Battleworld, he stayed behind, and She-Hulk became the next member of the Fantastic Four. And I don't really like the way She-Hulk is presented in this book. We have like 3 issues here where she doesn't get to do hardly anything at all. There's one issue where there's like this silhouetted shape of She-Hulk in the foreground of the cover, and then you've got Sue, Johnny, and Reed are in the background, and it's like, who is the mysterious new member of the Fantastic Four? And She-Hulk is barely even in that comic. She's in like 2 pages of it total. She comes in, and then it's like Sue Storm collapses, and then it's like, oh, okay, we've got to go take her to the hospital. And She-Hulk barely gets to do anything in that comic. Then, in the next issue, it's mostly just a flashback story that Alicia Masters is telling She-Hulk about this adventure that the Thing and Sue Storm had before the Secret Wars miniseries happened. And then, again, She-Hulk is barely even in that story. She's in maybe 2 pages because the whole issue is a flashback. And then, the next issue, She-Hulk is, again, barely even in the issue because at this point, Reed Richards is talking to all these experts on radiation because I haven't even barely talked about the plot of this book. I still feel like I have so much to talk about. Sue Storm has been pregnant since the events of Volume 3, where the Fantastic Four were traveling to all these different worlds in the negative zone. And Sue is now experiencing complications of her pregnancy, and Reed Richards is frantically trying to figure out a way to save her life and save the baby's life. And then She-Hulk is just kind of standing around. And it makes a big deal about, hey, the Thing is in outer space now. He's not going to be a member of the Fantastic Four. She-Hulk is the new member. And you would think, for a series like this, where basically for 20, 25 years, the team lineup had been the same, with a few exceptions. I think at one point, Medusa of the Inhumans had been a member of the team, or Crystal, one of the Inhumans had been a member of the team. With a few exceptions, the team lineup had more or less stayed the same for 20, 25 years. You would think that replacing the Thing with She-Hulk would have been a huge deal, but for the first 3 issues that she's on the team, she does absolutely nothing and appears in maybe 6 pages in this entire book, even though she's in 3 issues of this book. And I'm not even a huge fan of She-Hulk. Usually I don't like the character that much, but I do feel like that she should have been given more to do when she first shows up. And I'm hoping that when I get into Fantastic Four Visionaries Volume 5, that she will be given more to do, and she will actually be a member of the team and not just be hanging out in the background, not doing anything like she does in this book. So anyway, whenever I get past all the crossover stuff, really this book, what really amazes me about it is that it feels like John Byrne had all of this planned out. And some of it he did have planned out. Like the crossover with Alpha Flight, he was writing and drawing both books. So obviously he had that one planned out. But then like the whole ping pong with Chris Claremont, where both of them were very clearly angry with each other and continually trying to one-up the other one with different stuff going on in their own comic books, that sort of thing, it feels like it's planned out here. It feels like just a natural progression of what John Byrne was doing in this series. And then the Secret Wars thing, I'm pretty sure that he didn't plan the whole Secret Wars event. It's entirely possible that he was planning to leave the Thing behind on the alien world, because I'm pretty sure while this series was going on that Byrne was also writing and drawing the Thing. So it's very probable that while Secret Wars was being planned, that he said, hey, let's take the Thing out of the Fantastic Four and put him in his own series. And I'm pretty sure that there was some discussions about how the Thing really didn't need his own solo series because you can't do very many stories with him without putting him back into the Fantastic Four. They were saying that his solo series can't really exist because he's so intrinsically tied to the Fantastic Four. I think that I read that there were some discussions about that at Marvel Comics, and so Byrne was trying to find a way to continue doing the Thing series, but take him out of the Fantastic Four. And honestly, putting him on an alien world millions of miles away, that's probably the best way to do it. You really wouldn't be able to, at least in a way that becomes believable, you wouldn't be able to keep the Thing on Earth and have him in his own series, but he's no longer part of the Fantastic Four. Like, when he comes back from Secret Wars, says, okay, guys, I quit. I'm going to go to New York and become a bouncer. See you guys later. I'm not part of your comic book anymore. That would have been really weird, and I don't think anyone would have liked that. I think having him be on the Battle World, that makes a little bit more sense in trying to keep his own comic book going and be able to tell his own stories, but keep him out of the Fantastic Four comic book. The only other thing I think I can talk about here is Sue's pregnancy, which that's that's something that when you're reading this, if you don't know a whole lot about the Fantastic Four, you might be thinking that this is going to be the birth of Franklin's little sister, Valerie, or Valeria. I think it's Valerie. And no, she's actually born much later, like in the late 90s in the comic book. And this is a character that Sue Storm, she is pregnant, but then she loses the baby. And this is a really heavy issue where this happens, where Reed Richards spends most of the issue trying to convince Dr. Octopus to come help him save his wife and save the baby, because Dr. Octopus is the only other expert on radiation that Reed hasn't talked to and hasn't gotten to come and look at his wife. He's got all these other experts, himself, Dr. Michael Morbius, Bruce Banner, Sasquatch from Alpha Flight. All these people are experts, and all of them are basically saying, we don't know what to do. You should go and get Dr. Octopus. He's smarter than all of us. And by the time Reed gets back, it's like, sorry, Reed, you lost the baby. And in a way, it kind of feels like a precursor to The Watchmen. If you have read The Watchmen, you know that towards the end of the book, Night Owl and what's his name, Rorschach, they go to fight the bad guy, the kind of the villain behind the whole story, and they say, we're not going to let you do this. And he says, what are you talking about? I did it 35 minutes ago. It's kind of one of those end of the issue, jaw-breaking, jaw-dropping moments where it's like, oh wow, this is really shows us that even though these characters are larger than life, even though someone like Reed Richards, most often he is able to win, he's able to triumph over his adversity. In this case, with all of his intelligence, he's not able to do anything, and he's not always able to win. And I'm very curious to see where the comic is going to go in Volume 5 of this run, because the Fantastic Four is a series that you want to see it be very positive and upbeat, and you want to see it be a hopeful series, a series that is about having hope. And when a character, a main character in this book, loses his child, two main characters actually, Reed and Sue, when they lose their child, it's going to be very difficult for this series to continue to be optimistic and hopeful after such a tragedy happens in the life of these characters. And the way that panel is presented, I can show it to you right now, it's just one small panel against a black background, and it really just, it highlights just how hopeless everything is when you lose a child like that. And I've never lost a child, so I definitely can't speak to that, but it really hammers it home that this is how it would feel. You would feel empty, which is kind of what that page kind of makes you feel. You feel empty when something like this happens to you. And on the one hand, I'm very interested to see how John Byrne is going to handle this, how he's going to handle the tone of the series from here on out. If he's going to have it be a little bit more somber, a little bit more depressing after this happens, or if he's pretty quickly going to kind of take things back into the slightly more adventurous, hopeful direction that the series had been going. I don't know what he's going to do, but I'm very interested to see how he handles that. And if you've been watching any of my other reviews of Byrne's Fantastic Four run, I know it's been a really long time since I did a review of one of his volumes, but if you've been reading any of my other reviews, or listening to any of my other reviews, you know that I've been kind of back and forth on his run. Especially the first two volumes, I was kind of like, I don't really know if I'm liking this run. But starting in Volume 3, I was really starting to like it. Volume 4, I like it just as much as Volume 3. It's able to take old familiar elements of the Fantastic Four, but it's able to shake them up also and give us a new, interesting way of telling these stories. For example, taking the Thing out of the book and putting She-Hulk on the team. That's something that it's new and it's interesting, and it's going to provide lots of new and interesting stories. So I'm really digging this series right now. I think it just took me a little while to get into this show, into this book, and really enjoy what Byrne is doing. So I'm very much looking forward to Volume 5 of the Fantastic Four run by John Byrne. So those are my thoughts on this book. If you guys liked it, like this review, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you've read this book and you liked it or didn't like it, let me know what you thought in the comments below. And I will see you guys in the future with some other videos. So you guys have a great rest of the day, and until then, I'll see you later.